So welcome everybody to Scrutiny Review Panel 2, Children's Services Ofsted Improvements. We have a few guests joining us today as well. As everyone knows, this is a virtual meeting, obviously. We'll move through the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence of substitutions. We have Councillor Faye Block substituting for Councillor Sitara Anjum, who has another meeting. We have Councillor Steve Donnelly substituting for Councillor Praveen Anand. Mr. Paul Adair, who is our co-optee, is due at another commitment. And Caroline Fair, Director, Children and Families, is on annual leave. Thank you, Councillors Block and Donnelly, for subbing in. We appreciate that. Obviously, we have to change the date. Item 2, urgent matters, we have none. Item 3, matters to be considered in private. I believe there are none. Item 4, declaration of interest. Does anybody have any declarations they would like to make? Nope. Fantastic. Item 5, minutes of the last meeting. Would anyone like to make any comments, or is everyone happy with these?
You're happy with this, Chair?
Happy.
Fantastic. So they can be agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, we will move on to the meat of the agenda now. So I'll pass it across to Charles Bernard, who is the Assistant Director, Early Help and Ealing Services for Children with Additional Needs, Ruth Mender, Interim Head of Service Children with Disabilities, and Anne-Marie Smith, Children's Commissioner. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'll introduce this briefly, and then I'm going to hand over to colleagues who prepared the paper today. So we are focused on Haydock, which is a respite service offering overnight and holiday provision overnight for vulnerable children with disabilities. It used to be provided in Ealing previously, but this is a new build centre, and it opened in the middle of COVID. So they've worked hard to work around the restrictions of COVID and start taking in children from around January time. And we've got Emily, who is from Action for Children, who is the provider. The building itself is purpose-built. It's in Northolt. And we've been around it virtually. I've been around it in person. It's a very beautiful and great facility for Ealing. And we're very lucky to have Action for Children, who are on a 10-year contract to provide 900 bed nights for us. I'm going to hand over to, because I don't want to say everything, so I'm going to hand over to Anne-Marie. And Anne-Marie, you can talk through the contract and how we're beginning to use the provision, if that's okay.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Anne-Marie Smith, Children's Commissioner. So in terms of the contract, we actually started the contract in August of this year, and we opened this service in November. We had a virtual launch in November. In terms of the contract, we have a very close working relationship with Action for Children. We meet literally every week. We were meeting twice weekly, and this is to make sure that we kind of have a seamless transition and mobilisation of the service. So as I've been working with Emily to discuss building issues, and also in terms of operational issues, and actually working closer with the Children with Disabilities team in terms of the referrals to the service as well. The referral process, and again, families are referred into the services. It's not a self-referral in terms of that facility, but there's a very robust referral service in terms of assessments, making sure staff actually have relevant training to cater to the individual needs of those young people that do attend, and also quite a lot of work actually takes place in terms of visits and so forth with families beforehand and visiting the facility. In terms of the contract, we have a 6-month review, and that will just reflect in terms of how the contract is actually working. Is it working well? Lessons learned. One of the key features for us in terms of commission is really to work quite closely with parents and also get their input into the service, to making sure that anything that we do is co-designed and actually can inform our service development. So far, the service has been working quite well. the building, as Charles alluded to, is a brand new building. So again, I think the reception from parents has been quite positive. What I would do is actually pass on to Emily, because she can talk a bit more about the actual detailed referral process.
Hello. Hello. So I'm Emily Evans. I'm the Children's Services Manager. So I was overseeing the setup of Haydock, and I'm sitting with Thomas Williams, who's the Registered Manager. In terms of the referral process, so there is a system where you're referred via the social worker. The social worker will carry out an assessment of need and then pass that on to panel. And then the panel will agree a package of care. And then that will then be passed to us via referral. And then what we do is we then work with the family and the child to gather the correct information, to put in place the training that the staff will need to ensure they have the right skills to support the children. So if there's a health need, we'll get the right training for that health need. And then we set up a bespoke transition for that child, so that as they transition into the service, we do it in a way that's very nurturing and works for them. Some children transition in really very quickly without any issue, and other children need a bit more time. So, I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
One of the things I wanted to mention in terms of the contract, we have allocated around 900 bed nights per annum. But again, that's flexible as well. So we can flex above if we need to, but that's in the core contract. As Charles alluded to, it's a 10-year contract. But again, with any contract, we will review to make sure that it's responsive to the needs of the service, making sure that we actually do engage with families and all stakeholders around that provision, and try and make sure that, you know, the services have the best experience possible. One of the things we wanted to do today was to actually share with you a video and gives quite a good overview of the service, and to also get some feedback from staff working there, but also people that actually visited as well. So I'll start that video if that's okay. Just going to share my screen. Harjit, can you just allow me to share my screen if possible? Thank you. Just waiting for this to load, and I'll just start.
I thought I've just done that.
That's great. I'm just going to start it now. It's just loading.
I'm not getting sound. Am I alone?
No, Councillor Donnelly, I'm not getting any sound either. Harjit, I don't think any of us are getting any.
Yes, that doesn't appear to be the sound from the videos for some reason.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, we're not getting the sound. I'm not sure if it's it's on speaker on the video.
Okay. Are you? Can everybody here now?
Well,
No, we're
we
still
can
not
hear
getting the sound.
you, Anna-Marie, but not the actual video sound.
Yeah, no sound.
There's no sound in the video.
No.
Yeah.
Afraid not.
It's okay. It's I can hear it myself. I'm just wondering why. Let me just check and see.
It's also the picture is tracking quite slowly.
Oh, I see. I'm
Wait.
wondering if it might be my laptop. Give me 1 second. I'll just stop sharing. I'll just stop sharing. I'll stop sharing. So I'm not quite sure why I did allow the mic on there, so I don't know if everybody got to. Unfortunately, didn't get to hear the sound on the actual video.
Harjit, is it possible to give it a try if you have the link, possibly?
I can try and do
I do
that.
have.
I have got the link. Oh, Linda, did you want to do it?
I think I sent the link beforehand.
Talking. It's going past very quickly, even the writing. So
Oh,
it wasn't possible to read it because it was so fast. Even if
it was. I see. Apologies for that. When I was actually showing the video, it was showing in real time, and it was okay. Some apologies that you wasn't, whilst you were actually viewing it, it wasn't showing at the time. But what I can do is I can send out the video link. Hopefully, it might be working now. There we go. I think we've got the same problem.
No, we can't hear anything at the moment. Do you perhaps have the video not on YouTube in another way?
No, at the moment it's only hosted on YouTube at the moment, so we don't have a separate link that's available.
Okay, well, in the interest of this not working
Sure.
at the moment, can I suggest you send the link obviously afterwards, as you've suggested,
Yes.
but walk us through the gist of the video so we know, we get an idea of it, so that at least we can
Yes.
raise questions on it if we need to.
So essentially, it gives an overview about the centre itself, and also the experience of young people actually attending, the kind of activities that they have in facilities. So they have a sensory room, again about the kind of the way that how it's actually laid out and set out. That's actually quite welcoming as well. The facilities that are actually within the room, and also around, I think more particularly are really that the experience for those young people actually and their families, that one, they feel comfortable, but also that process is actually taken quite carefully as well, and it is a phased process. So I think, as well as the actual building itself, the grounds, exactly, there's quite a bit of time has actually gone into that to actually make sure that's inviting, and so there's space outside for them to hold activities as well during the warmer months as well. Emily and Thomas, I don't know if you want to say a bit more about in terms of the staffing and the training that they actually undertake.
Oh, hello. So there is a large programme of training for the staff. So initially we have an induction package that will introduce them to the basics around Action for Children, the policies, the key policies, that ensure that we safeguard children and the staff are aware of what they need to be aware of to work within our organisation. And then there is additional training. So we will provide training around moving and handling, first aid, food hygiene. I mean, during a pandemic, that's been a bit more of a challenge because we've had to do that and approach that differently. But alongside that, we've been working with the community nurse teams so that they provide the health training. Staff currently are receiving training and competency checks around gastrostomy feeding and jejunostomy feeding so that they can support those vulnerable children that require that. Even with medication training, there's an ongoing program of competency testing. We've booked in some bespoke safeguarding disabled children training through the Ancraft Trust. We'll be looking at sensory play, understanding autism. So there is quite a wide program and quite a lot of resources within Action for Children that we can pull on, as well as sort of external providers. Yeah, and so far the staff team have been gelling really well. They're very child focused, and when we interview staff, we're not just looking at their skills, we're also looking at their value base and what motivates them to want to work with children, and check that their values align with Action for Children and Ealing's values as well. So, you know, we are particularly looking for the right kind of people to support the vulnerable children that will come to the home.
Thank you, Emily. I was, Chair, if it's helpful, I've got Ruth Meader here on audio, and she's happy to talk through a recent referral into the respite care unit, just to sort of give you a flavour of the sort of needs and the sort of service that it provides.
I think that would be very valuable, Charles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ruth, do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. What we had was very, very early on, when Haydock was just starting to be up and running back in October last year, we had a child who had a serious burn incident at home. He was a 14-year-old boy who was he has autism, and he was very, very difficult to manage at home, and he put his hand right across the cooker in the house and burnt his face, his upper body, his arm, his throat, very badly, and he ended up in the Bristol Burns unit. And there were a couple of very iffy nights where we wondered whether this child would survive. It was serious burns. But over time, he did get better, well enough, but the problem was he was always picking at his burns, and it was very difficult to keep the bandages on them. And so there came a point when he was well enough to be discharged from hospital, but we were worried about whether mother would be able to take care of him and his other siblings at home. And Haydock, he went to Haydock. He was one of probably the very first children they had, and he stayed there for several nights during the week. And he recovered extremely well, and eventually went back to school and was able to do a return home. So my thanks to Haydock, they did an excellent job, and this was an emergency placement. It was not an expected one at all in their remit, but they did really, really well. It was right at the beginning. I don't think, Emily, you remember him. I don't think you were involved then.
Bear with me. I was on mute there, sorry. Yes, I was, and he continues to visit now. And we've got a good relation. He's, you know, he was anxious at first, but he's so very settled now, and you know, he's a lovely chap.
Yes, he comes to Haydock 2 nights a month now, and it's a really successful package for him, and we would like to see that continue for him.
Came out of the blue.
Thank you, Ruth.
One of the other things I was just going to mention again, just follow on from that case, is that we actually do on our weekly meetings, we will go through all the referrals again, just to make sure everything's working okay, everything's in place. So I think it does really help, and actually, you know, having that relationship that we can tackle any sort of difficult or complex cases. And again, we trying to, across children's services and working with our providers for Action for Children, we're trying to make sure that they can access any relevant training that we have within the council as well, in addition as well to accessing regular testing as well. So and with the vaccine, making sure that all staff are actually able to access vaccines as well, so make sure that not just the staff but also the service users remain safe. I don't know if we have any further questions at all.
So at this stage, in that case, I will open it up to questions. If anyone does have any questions, please use the raise your hand button. And if you can't, mention it in the chat. I believe Councillor Kumar has a question.
Yes, thank you. My question is to Emily. You mentioned external providers. I'd like to know a little bit more about that, please. Who they are and why you need them.
It was in reference to the training that we received. So within Action for Children, they can provide certain training, e-learning and so on that we can do, and we can pick up on the basics. But when there's a specialist need, maybe first aid, we'd be going out to St John's ambulance, the specialist people. Osteopaths for industry are the people that we use for the moving and handling training. So Action for Children are quite a large organisation, and they have a select kind of amount of preferred suppliers that their services will use, that have been vetted and that we know are good quality, so that we've got some quality assurance in the training that we're receiving. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. No, I was interested to know. I mean, why it seems like quite a compact little unit as such, as in staffing, and you're all got your remit, but the need for external providers, I just wanted some clarification on that. And not sort of, recruiting, say, agency staff and stuff like that.
No, we haven't needed to use them.
That was the, so that was the question. So the other question I had was on the children, like you just mentioned, the young man who comes now twice a month and who recovered remarkably. Do you have a set time limit for the children who come in? Is there a certain, I mean, is it challenging when somebody perhaps has really benefited from, being with you? Do you find that there are issues when they have to leave?
Well, ideally, the way that we're set up is that the child and the family will receive a package of care that's ongoing. So that was a special case, an emergency placement, and then he's now got an ongoing package of care. So children can stay with us up until the age of 18. So we can continue to support them over that time. And I know from experience in our other services, when it's time for children to move on, that's, sometimes more upsetting for staff than it is for children, because they're moving on to pastures new, and the staff, they will miss those children. But for us, they may get allocated as sort of a selection of nights, so they may be allocated 24 nights a year, and we work with families to see how they want to use those. Quite often it's spread out over the year, so that the parents get a regular break, the children get regular social interaction, and that will continue for the time that the package is suitable and deemed appropriate. It's not really, at the moment, it is a new service, so we're not having a lot of emergency placements where children come and then go as yet, but we like to work with Ealing on sort of meeting the needs of the children and the families in the area.
We're also working with a child who will soon be 18. So we're looking at transitioning into adulthood services as well. So that's a big piece of work that we're looking into at the moment.
Yes, I'm glad you've mentioned that, because I was going to say, coming to the age of 18 and the realization kind of hits in that it's time to move on. That is where I have seen and found that there are, that's the challenging bit. So I can understand the feelings you have. I mean, there is always, in a situation like this, there is the emotional attachment as well. I mean, I'm like that, so I can understand what you're saying. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a question here from Councillor Summers, who's typed it out as he's not able to ask himself, but he asks about the outdoor area at the Haydock Avenue Centre and the ongoing situation with the parcel of land being given to you by Howarth Homes, who own the land next door. What do you plan to do with that piece of land, and how will it help the children?
Yeah, my question was a bit of a follow-up to that from Councillor Summers. Maybe if I tag it on.
Of course.
Yeah, it's related to that piece of land, and my understanding is the original piece of land has planning restrictions on its use. So is that right, and how is that situation being managed? Because understand there may be issues around a requirement to apply to change the designation at a cost, and how that would be taken forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on those questions. The centre as it is built at the moment has a garden, which is designed and improved over time, and I happily bring Emily and Thomas back in to talk that through. There's a large-scale development in Northolt with already outline planning permission. There is to extend and make the garden even bigger. There was an idea to use some of the land behind the building. I've progressed that through Education Property Services and understand that because it already has outline planning permission, that would be quite difficult now because it could be a cost to the builder of the scheme that's got outline planning permission. But the centre does have a garden, but this was an idea to extend it further. So we haven't really progressed that at this point, and we have explored it. Emily and Thomas, do you want to talk about the garden space that you have currently? I know you'd like it to be bigger, as we all would, but it is quite a nice space.
Yes, of course. But what we have developed and are in the process of doing at the moment is having it landscaped. So what we do have is beautiful. We've had artificial grass put down in 2 separate areas. One of them is completed and one is in motion at the moment. We've had a swing put in for the children, a veggie patch and a herb garden. And we're working with a garden landscape company at the moment to provide natural shade, so through a use of sails, so that the children can benefit from the garden during the warmer summer months. And some sensory toys and activities as well, including a water wall and a seesaw. So they're being developed and spoken about at the moment, and hoping to be installed in the next couple of months, ready for use during the summer. So it's a really lovely space we've got.
Thanks, Thomas. That's helpful.
Councillor Donnelly, do you have any follow-ons, or is that a legacy hand?
Legacy, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Block.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just wanting to ask about how much demand there is, because I know that there's kind of 900 beds per annum, and you're currently working with 12 children, and it sounds like it's a really great provision. But thinking wider about how much demand there is in the borough and how much of that this provision is being able to meet. Thank you.
You're muted, Charles.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to come in there. Because it's a new provision, we don't actually have a waiting list at this stage. We are doing the assessment work. There's high demand within the parent group in Ealing, because obviously it's a really valuable provision in terms of having some respite for them, especially the year that they've had. So there is a high demand. We're doing the assessment work, and obviously Action for Children phasing the children that are eligible in slowly. So we're gradually building up numbers, but at this point in time, there isn't a waiting list. We have the option for extending the contract to have more bed nights if we needed them. So I think it's up to 1,200. We've commissioned 900. At the moment, we are not seeing that we're going to go more than 900. For the next financial year, but we have the option in the future to extend that if we need to. So that's there. And I didn't say when we were talking about the building as well that there's a bit of future-proofing in that there is a single-storey building part to the building that we could actually, it's already been strengthened, and if we needed to extend the building again in the future, we could. So there's capacity at the moment, and there isn't a waiting list.
Councillor Block, do you have any follow-ons?
No, thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions from panel members? In that case, I have a few. So firstly, I noticed in the report you mentioned that weekend overnight respite has significant demand. I'm curious how this is fairly allocated between people who actually need to use the service. Also, you mentioned the case where you had to take someone in an emergency, but at how short a notice can you actually accept someone for a referral in a situation like that? And if, let's say, we had another lockdown, how does that affect people actually using the service? So 3 questions there. Thank you.
Okay, shall we start with the lockdown, as that was the last one? So during the lockdown, as far as possible, we're functioning as normally as possible, but there just are a few more considerations. I don't think we'll ever lose the level of cleaning that we've been doing, but we have to be really careful about matching children for their visits and keeping numbers slightly lower than you ordinarily would, so that you can, as far as possible, maintain social distancing. So, you know, we'd make a few adjustments to what we were doing, but actually we found that us and our sister services have all, in principle, functioned as normal. We haven't needed to reduce the service that we're offering. What was the other question? Sorry. Oh, how short notice? Sorry. No, okay. No. That one, there's many variables to that. So it all depends on actually what else is going on at the time. So if there is an emergency placement, can we meet the needs of that child with the other children that are already in? Have we got the staffing available? So it's a question of, you know, contact us, ask, and we'll see what we can do. We try to be as responsive as we can. But if we're already full that evening, that might make it difficult, and that may well go back to the social work team to look at whether they need to move children around and to support what's needed.
Yeah.
And
for example, with the case that we were talking about earlier on, we got the phone call in the morning, sorry, and the young person was sitting with us 3 hours later, so it was quite quick turnaround. But at that point, we had the luxury of the space available.
Yeah, and the staffing ready to go.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Councillor, I can't remember your first question.
So you, in the report, I read that weekend demand is normally
yes.
high. So how do you share this out, you know, fairly?
Yeah. So how we planned it for the next quarter, for example, is that we sent out an email to the parents with preferences, and we will allocate a fair share of the weekends, after school provision and school holidays. We've sent back our allocated dates, and parents have largely been very happy with what they've been given. So it's a bit like a big jigsaw. So it's quite a lot of work to undertake and fit everybody in. But yeah, it's working well so far.
Yeah, so, you know, we want a little bit of parity for families to make sure that all families have access to weekends. But we also then work with the request system. So if there is a special thing that's going on for a family that they know their child wouldn't enjoy, then we suggest that they request that particular day, and then their child can come and have fun with us, and they can go and do that thing that they know, you know, they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So it generally works well, and I think one of the key things is to try and build the relationship with the families, so that if we come across something, we work with them and we'll try and work something out.
Thanks, Emily. Chair, can I just come in as well around the holiday provision? So that the HAYDOC provision is respite, and it's overnight, and it's really for the children, young people of kind of quite a high level of need. But we do have other services in Ealing for children with a lower level of need. So to access HAYDOC, you require a social worker to carry out an assessment against agreed criteria. And against that, we decide how many days that they would be eligible for. So there's a process to be gone through. But we do have other services. So we have just commissioned Log Cabin to provide a daytime weekend offer for children with disabilities, and that there's high demand for that, and that's working well. And we also have a sitter service as well, that we can provide evening respite for families with a child with a disability. So there's another network of services for children of lower need, but HAYDOC is for that higher, sort of where there are significant medical needs usually, and they need that intensive care and support for an overnight stay.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. What is the staff to service user ratio? So say you're at full capacity, how many staff members would you normally have on at any time? And also, obviously this service has been contracted out, but did we consider in-house, and what were possibly the pros and cons of that, and maybe even cost implications?
Shall I take the question around the staffing ratio? For us, it all depends on the child's needs. So that information generally comes through on the assessment from the social worker. And then we carry out our own assessment to gain more information. And as we get to know the child, we tend to work out then what those staffing levels are that are needed. So there's sort of no fixed answer to that. We could have maybe 4 children in who all require one-to-one support. So that would probably have 4 staff to support them, possibly 5, depending on the needs, in order to ensure that the cleaning and the cooking is done as well. But then there may be other children that don't quite require that level of one-to-one. So the staffing ratio would go down. So it requires the team to be very flexible. There isn't the possibility of a fixed rota. We have to rota around the needs of the children. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Anne-Marie, would you like to come in on the commission of the services in-house? I think you might have been in post when that happened, and the paper went to Cabinet to decide on that process.
Yes, yes, it was just before I joined, but essentially we had historically our in-house service, which was Hello House, and actually what we actually found was that particular facility wasn't meeting the needs in terms of the young people that were attending. So with the investment that we received, we had 1.5 million pounds of funding from, and that about 385k was from NHS England to invest in a new bed facility. And again, it was really to make sure that we could facilitate those young people and their needs much better than the old facility. So going out, we had within the whole process, we would have had a options appraisal, basically to look at all options in terms of delivering the service, and actually to make sure that we did actually get best value for money, but also in terms of the scope around the service that we could provide. Commission service with a specialist provider like Action for Children was the best option that we sought, and actually that has been quite positive. Again, it will take some time in terms of building up, but we found that to be working quite well, and again building a relationship with the families, and also around the flexibility of the bed nights as well. So, you know, with the actual service, having a commission service was the best option that we found as part of the service.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I just had a little question on if I can ask whether you have a complaint system or a register in place, and have you had any complaints about anything? It could be Emily or Anne, but anyone can answer.
Yes.
And you know, if you are able to mention those, if you've had any, or what you yourself have found challenging. I always ask this because I think you've got to look at it from both sides, you know, the service provider and the service user. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that, please.
So maybe I'll start off, Councillor, in terms of the complaints process. So we have our own kind of internal complaint services process within children's services. So service users can actually always complain, or as well as make compliments as well. So we have that service, and that will be taken and assessed accordingly. But with any complaint and compliments, we always encourage that to get the learning from that. We work quite closely with Action for Children. Again, if there is a complaint with the service, we will sit down, we'll discuss that, see what can be resolved, see what can be discussed with the parents, anything that needs to be done in terms of learning, or make sure we capture that, and also make sure we feed back to the parents accordingly. But I mean, the key thing for us is not to see complaints as negative, but also see it as a learning process. We want to make sure we listen to the views of those service users, because ultimately they need to make sure they have they want to continue to use the service first and foremost, but also have confidence in terms of the service that they're going to be providing, that if they find something wrong or if something doesn't go well, that we actually learn from that. And I think to have that approach and have that continual kind of engagement with service users and their parents and families, that works quite well. Ruth meets regularly with the Ealing Parent Care Forum again, so again we can listen to views and things that might not be working well or what does well, and make sure that informs service delivery and actually a widened commissioning service. So Charles talked earlier about the other services that we actually have, and we have commissioning standards that we work to, and we want to make sure that's actually good or above basically, and we work quite hard behind the scenes to make sure we maintain that. So it's an ongoing process, and we welcome any kind of feedback at all. It has to be cumulative throughout the year. We'll conduct surveys again, working with parents and carers, but essentially if there's any issues, we'll work together collectively to make sure we address that. Emily, I don't want to
That's right. Do you want me to add that? So that we also have our own systems within Action for Children. So we do welcome feedback, complaints and grumbles, so that again, as Anne-Marie says, that we can learn from them and we can build those relationships, and we can move on and improve things. But we do have a way of gaining feedback regularly anyway. So we ask young people at every visit, what they thought, or if they aren't able to verbalise that, we'll look at observations and see if we can determine how they felt through their behaviour and their interactions. There's a board for the zones of regulation, so that can help children express how they're feeling when they're there. We have symbols so they can use those to express how they're feeling. We've got an ideas box that people can pop ideas in, regular contact with families. At the moment it's sort of almost before every visit because everything is so very new. So there haven't really been any big complaints so far. A couple of grumbles that we've needed to work through with families, and there's been learning from that, and some of it's about learning about the young person, so we didn't know that would be an issue beforehand. So we've learned, and then we've put things in place to address that. And we're also sort of creating so that we continue to make sure that we get feedback and we have participation with families and young people. We're collating that information now for our commissioners on a quarterly basis. So we're putting together sort of so that we can check in that we're doing our job properly, and that we're making sure that we're checking in with people and see how things are going, and that we're resolving things. And we want feedback from professionals, families, young people, the staff. So yeah, there's lots and lots of avenues to obtain feedback, learn and grow and develop.
Well, thank you and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. It is actually really lovely. We do enjoy it.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Nope. Okay, so Charles, is there anything else you need to cover?
No, I think that's it, Chair. And just to say, we've got ongoing parent representation in Ruth's team, and they meet fortnightly and they're very active. So we're getting that feedback through all the time in terms of growing and developing the service. And I think, as Emily and Thomas have said, it's been really well received so far. So the journey is great. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Charles. In that case, we're done with this item, and thank you to all the officers for attending. You don't have to stick around for the rest of the meeting. If you can start your long weekend early, or you're more than welcome if you want to stay for the rest of it. We will move on to item 7, draft final report for the panel with recommendations. I'm going to presume that everyone's read the report and ask, does anyone have any comments or suggestions on the report but not on the recommendations at the moment? No. Okay, in that case we'll move along to our recommendations, of which we don't actually have many, but we're going for quality over quantity, obviously, which is what as OSC is asked for as well. We have 5. Harjeet, would you just quickly go over them?
Yes, Chair. So we've currently got R1 that says Ealing Council should provide adequate corporate support for children's social care service in the delivery of its substantial action plan to minimize any adverse impact on staff and vulnerable families in the borough.
So does anyone have any comments on that one, or are we happy to go with that as a recommendation? Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had the same feeling of cheekiness at my own scrutiny panel a week or two back, because I hadn't been present earlier in the cycle. I hadn't been on the committee earlier in the cycle when things have been discussed. So I felt I had a bit of a nerve. But I guess from my point of view, as much, it was like, in saying provide adequate support, in what way? So let's say the team turn around and say, well, in what way is our support currently not adequate? What's our response on that? Okay, that was the one thing I couldn't really draw out, was where we felt currently the support could be improved. And if we were able to say, for example, a couple of things, that might just strengthen the recommendation. But of course, you know, what do I know about this? I wasn't here.
No, I believe that's a very valid comment you've made, Councillor Donnelly. Ajit, who do we know who made that recommendation itself?
So it was from the discussions that have taken place over the last two meetings, and it was more to say where people felt that more could be done, because the service naturally is working through the COVID challenges, and therefore they're unable to do certain things as they would have liked to have done under normal circumstances. There have been challenges, so just working with that and be able to provide what they can at this stage, and then to continue improving on that. I think that's where this one was coming from.
Councillor Donnelly, any follow-ups or response to that?
No, not really, Chair. I guess if what we're saying is that as a council, we should be ready to move quickly where new requirements are identified, maybe that's a form of words that as and when new demands are made, just to indicate some that it's forward-looking rather than a criticism of what's happened to date. But that's my thought.
No, I think that's a very valuable feedback and a valid point. Hajit, can we change the wording to incorporate what Councillor Donnelly has suggested?
Yes, certainly.
Perfect. Any other comments on recommendation 1? No. Councillor Donnelly, your hand is still up, by the way. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to recommendation 2, which is Ealing Council should ensure that there is effective cross-organisational working of the relevant services such as children's social care services with the housing service to address the needs of vulnerable children and young people in the borough. Any comments? So can we agree to send this one further? I'll take silence as a yes.
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 Yeah.
Perfect. Recommendation 3, Ealing Council should set up a care leavers rent guarantor scheme as soon as possible to support young people within the private rented sector. Any comments on this?
No, Chair, this is very important and vital recommendation, and we must support that recommendation collectively.
I agree, Councillor Mahmood, it is very important. So can we agree it?
Agreed, Chair.
Chair, agreed.
Thank you. Recommendation 4, Ealing Council should introduce a condition on large developments within the borough for a priority provision of social accommodation suitable for care leavers, for example, including adequate rooms with access to communal facilities such as kitchens. And I believe Councillor Malcolm has a comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I support this as an aim, that there is obviously a huge volume of large sets of accommodation that have been agreed over the last 5 or more years, and there's never quite enough social that's needed. And I think we do need to make sure that within that social sort of types of accommodation, there is accessible and suitable areas for care leavers. Now, within the planning process, I'm not on the planning committee, so I'm not got the expertise of some others on the committee on that aspect. Is this recommendation as it's written strong enough, do you think, or do we think that portfolio holders and officers will be able to go away and put a bit more detail to this so that we actually do, in a year or two's time, get developments with the outcome that we're looking for?
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. Is there anyone on the panel who's actually on the planning committee or who can maybe shed a bit more light on this? Councillor Donnelly.
Well, I am on the whether I can shed more light in the way that Councillor Malcolm would wish. I mean, I think it's a very sensible way to be thinking. I can't, off the top of my head, answer about the extent to which the powers exist to determine this. You know, how much and in what way. But I think it's an eminently good thing to be exploring at the very least. So, you know, I can't answer you know, and I'm sure the planning officers wouldn't wish me to present myself as a planning professional in any circumstances, let alone at a public meeting. But yeah, I think it's something that should be explored. A very worthy thing to look at.
So, Hajid, maybe we can have in there, or maybe not in the recommendation itself, but just have some feedback from officers on this as well to the panel in the future, you know, when this is taken a bit further.
I think this was actually, we did discuss it at a pre-agenda meeting, and I think Charles, he's not on the call now, is he? He's left. But I know that there was a response, so perhaps Hajit, you could look into the response that was given, because I know we touched base on this at that meeting, but I right this moment I can't recall what the response was.
Yes, most certainly. I will look into this further after the meeting.
So, apart from that, are there any other comments on this one? In which case, can we agree it?
Agreed, Chair.
Yeah.
Chair.
And I believe this one came from Councillor Miriam Rice, who only subbed in, so thank you to her. Recommendation 5, the Children's Social Care Service should work with the relevant services such as educational establishments in providing appropriate post-COVID-19 support to vulnerable children and young people. Any comments? Nope. Can we agree in that case?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Perfect. Last but not least, recommendation 6, the Children's Social Care Service should review the information documentation that is provided to adopters with a view to simplifying and making it more user-friendly. Any comments?
Yeah, I think with that one, perhaps we should be working with the users rather than just looking at it from officers, or, you know, I'll let, you know, I think when I was on a different committee working with care leavers, getting them involved so that they can put their input into how they would find it more user-friendly would be really useful.
Okay, so maybe change the wording slightly to ask for feedback from adopters with how they would, what would make it simpler for them, or what would have been what could be done simpler.
Yes, noted, Jan.
Okay, perfect. Can we all agree that one then?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So we've obviously gone through all the recommendations. However, we did have some a new item today, which obviously, as we were short on meetings this year, we only covered today. Now, does anyone have any recommendations that they would like to make from what we've covered tonight?
Yeah, I think Harjit, I mean, I sent you about 10, but they were more, some of it were more comments and sort of needed to be formed into questions. So the one that I was quite keen on was, again, the COVID situation is, if the virtual is to continue, it is important to establish how well this works for them. So that was an area I wanted to be considered. And I think even on the, let's have a discussion on that one. There were a couple, so.
So, Councillor, do you have some wording for that one, perhaps?
Harjeet?
Yes, so I will look into that. I might have a separate conversation with you to see
Yes.
how you want that worded.
Yeah, because I think it fits in with the previous two that I've put in there. But we can, it's all relevant to what we're talking about. But I thought that because we are in this situation and the situation is going to continue, there needs to be something that we could put in as a recommendation, if it's possible to do that. It may not be, actually, because that is being considered anyway, but I just wanted to find out how and establish how well it works, and I didn't quite get that.
Okay, I'm sure we can look into that, Councillor Kumar, as well. I haven't had any comments from anyone with regards to what we've discussed earlier on, what we've had presented to us by the officers. So what I would suggest is that maybe if we all had I appreciate it's a long weekend, so maybe if we said instead of a week, maybe until the 12th of this month, to email in recommendations to Harjeet, and the chair, myself, and the vice chair Seema Kumar could look at the recommendations that come in and agree them if the panel's happy with that.
Agreed, Chair.
That's fine, yeah. That's
Okay, so apart from that, I don't think we have anything else to cover. Scrutiny topics for 21-22. Does anyone have any suggestions that they would like to make at this stage? No? Okay.
Send them in. So.
Okay. Harjeet, is there anything else we need to cover before I say a few words?
Well, this is the last meeting, and therefore you as a chair might want to address that.
Indeed. So obviously, like I said, I presume you've all read the draft report. I have not done my chair's overview yet because obviously we had the item on the agenda tonight, after which now I will get that done. I would like to thank Mr. Paul Adair, who was our co-optee, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight because of certain reasons, but thank you to him and his valuable insight. Thank you to our external witnesses who we had, David and Susie Dye, who were the adopters. Again, valuable feedback, really good, and good luck to them on their amazing journey. Thank you to my vice chair, Seema Kumar, been very valuable to have you, the panel, and even all our subs, some of which are here tonight. Thank you as well. All the officers who have been a part of this, Caroline's team and Gary. The reports have been some of the best I've actually read. And Harjeet, yourself as well. You've been a great help for this panel, so I greatly appreciate that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, officers. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for chairing it.
Thank you, Councillor Pada, much appreciated. If there's nothing else we need to cover, I believe that brings us to the end of all of our panel meetings. So once
I think Councillor Malcolm's put in the chat he wants to say something.
Yeah, Councillor Malcolm.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you on behalf of my group for the chairing of this committee, and obviously the previous year when you did that as well. So just wanted to put on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. Greatly appreciate that. Thank you. So yes, like I said, that brings us to an end. Have a nice Easter weekend, everyone. Enjoy the long weekend. I don't think we're going to have the weather that we've had this week, but nevertheless, and I shall see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.